Welcome to a chapter a day. What if everything you've been trying to fix in your external life was never meant to be fixed externally? What if your results, your relationships, your money, your timing were not the problem, but the reflection? Because here's the truth most people never hear. You're not living in a fixed reality. You are living in a responsive one. And the 0.1%, the people who seem to bend outcomes, attract opportunities, and move through life with unnatural timing, are not doing something extra. They are doing something invisible. They are maintaining a frequency so consistent, so stable, that reality has no choice but to reorganize around it. But here's where everything changes for you. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you consistently are. Not for 5 minutes, not when you meditate, not when you feel inspired, but when no one is watching, when nothing is working, when doubt is loud. That is where reality is decided. So as you go through this audiobook, don't listen like information is being added to you. Listen like something is being removed from you. Old identity patterns, old meanings, old reactions to life. Because by the end of this journey, you will not be trying to manifest your reality anymore. You will understand why you have been creating it all along. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Chapter 1. Stop trying to manifest. Start maintaining frequency. You've probably noticed something strange about manifestation. The harder you try, the more inconsistent it becomes. One day you feel aligned. You visualize clearly. You affirm. You believe. And for a moment, it feels like something is shifting. Then life happens. A message you didn't expect. A delay. A setback. A thought that says, maybe this isn't working. And suddenly, everything collapses. Now pause for a moment and think about this. If manifestation were really about effort, why does effort so often lead to burnout instead of breakthrough? There is something deeper happening here, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Manifestation is not action-based. It is not about doing more. It is not about stacking techniques. It is not about perfect routines or perfect thoughts. It is about something far more subtle. Identity stability over time. Let that land for a moment. Not intensity, not inspiration, not even belief in a single moment, but who you are, being consistently across time. Because here is the truth most people miss. What you hold holds you back or moves you forward. Say that internally with me. What you hold holds you back or moves you forward. If you hold doubt in the background while holding hope in the foreground, you are split. If you hold certainty in meditation but collapse into fear in daily life, you are split. And split energy does not manifest clarity. It creates delay, confusion, inconsistency. Now let's go deeper. Most people trying to manifest are not actually aligned. They are fluctuating. They read something inspiring and their state rises. They watch a video and they feel powerful. They journal and suddenly they are the version of themselves who already has everything. But then a small inconvenience appears. A delay in results. A silence where they expected movement. And their entire state shifts again. This is what I want you to notice. It is not the lack of knowledge that is blocking results. It is frequency leakage. Now this is important. Frequency leakage is when your identity cannot hold a stable emotional state long enough for reality to mirror it back. It is when inspiration enters you, but doubt quietly exits you. It is when belief shows up in moments, but fear runs the background continuously. And here's the part almost nobody wants to face. Reality does not respond to your peak moments. It responds to your sustained state. Not what you feel once, but what you keep returning to. Let me ask you something directly. Where are you inconsistent when no one is watching? Not the version of you that you show others. Not the version of you pretend to be during high moments, but the quiet version, the private version, the thinking version, the reacting version. Because that version is the one reality is responding to. Take a breath here. You may not have noticed this before, but your inner state is always broadcasting. Even when you are silent, even when you are trying to stay positive, even when you are doing everything right. There is still a signal underneath the surface, and that signal is what shapes the external world. Now here is where everything begins to shift. You do not need to become more powerful, you need to become more stable. Because instability is what creates the illusion of manifesting, not working. It is not that nothing is happening. It is that too many versions of you are happening at once. One version believes, one version doubts, one version tries, one version gives up, and reality does not know which one to respond to. So it responds to the dominant pattern, the one that repeats most consistently. Now reflect on this. If your life is a reflection of your dominant state, what state are you repeating most often? Not occasionally, not ideally, but actually. And here is where the shift begins to happen. You stop asking, how do I manifest this? And you start asking, who am I being while I wait for it? Because waiting is not passive. Waiting is revealing. It reveals whether you are stable or reactive, aligned or fluctuating, rooted or dependent on outcomes. And this is where most people unknowingly collapse their progress. They begin to monitor reality instead of maintaining state. They look for signs, they search for proof, they measure progress externally. But in doing so, they destabilize the very frequency they're trying to hold. Let that sink in slowly. The moment you depend on external confirmation, you abandon internal stability. And without stability, there is nothing for reality to match. Now, let's go one layer deeper. There is a reason why letting go is so often mentioned, but rarely understood. Letting go is not about forgetting your desire. It is about stopping the constant fluctuation between states. It is about no longer negotiating with doubt every few minutes. It is about becoming internally consistent enough that the outcome is no longer emotionally disruptive. Because when your state is stable, outcomes stop feeling like shocks. They feel like natural extensions. Now pause again. Because here comes the subtle turning point of this entire chapter. What if nothing in your life is delayed? What if it is simply responding, but not to your desire? What if it is responding to your frequency? Because desire is loud, but frequency is consistent. Desire says, I want this. Frequency says, this is who I am. And reality always responds to identity, not request. So if you are trying to manifest from desire alone, you are speaking one language. But if your identity contradicts it, you are speaking another, and reality listens to the stronger signal. Always. Now, before we move forward, I want you to hold this understanding gently but seriously. You are not behind. You are broadcasting. Every thought, every reaction, every moment of doubt or alignment. It is all part of the signal, and that signal is already shaping what comes next. So stop trying to force outcomes. Start maintaining the version of you that does not fracture under uncertainty. Because that version is already closer than you think. And now, as this idea settles in, you may begin to notice something subtle. The real work was never about attracting something new. It was about becoming consistent enough that nothing within you contradicts what you say you want. And when that happens, reality has no resistance left to work against. It simply moves, it responds, it aligns. And yet, there is something even deeper happening beneath this layer, because even if you stabilize your frequency, there is still a hidden gap between who you are internally and what reality reflects back. A delay most people misunderstand completely. A calibration process almost nobody waits through correctly. And that is where we go next. You have begun to understand that manifestation is not effort, it is stability. But now, we go deeper into why even stability seems delayed in the physical world, and how that delay is the most misunderstood part of the entire process. Chapter 2. You are not broken, you are misaligned with your identity. There is a quiet assumption most people carry through life without ever questioning it. The assumption is this: if my life isn't working, something must be wrong with me. So they begin fixing themselves. They consume information, they try new systems, they change routines, they search for what is missing inside them. But what if nothing is missing? What if nothing is broken? What if the entire framework of self-fixing is based on a misunderstanding? Take a moment with that. Because this is where everything begins to shift. You are not broken. You are misaligned with your identity. Let that land slowly. Not broken, not lacking, not incomplete. Misaligned. And there is a massive difference between those two states. Because when you believe you are broken, you try to add things to yourself. But when you understand misalignment, you simply adjust position. You do not become someone new. You return to coherence. Now think about how most people approach abundance. They want more money, more stability, more opportunity. But internally, they still operate from a scarcity identity. They hesitate before spending. They overthink before investing in themselves. They expect loss before gain. They anticipate limitation even while hoping for expansion. And here is the key contradiction. They are not lacking abundance. They are misaligned with abundance. You don't need more. You need alignment with more. Say that slowly internally. You don't need more. You need alignment with more. Now pause for a moment and observe something subtle. When you think about your goals, there is often a gap between who you are trying to be and how you naturally think when you are not trying. That gap is where your current reality is formed. Not your goals, not your desires, but your default identity state. Let's go deeper. Have you ever noticed how certain thoughts repeat themselves without effort? Thoughts like, I need to be careful. This probably won't work. I should wait a little longer. I'm not there yet. These thoughts don't appear because you consciously choose them. They appear because they belong to an identity pattern you have rehearsed over time. And here is the key realization. Identity is not what you declare. Identity is what repeats without effort. Now, let's bring this into real life. Imagine someone who wants abundance. They might visualize wealth. They might say affirmations. They might even feel inspired for a moment. But then they check their bank account with anxiety. They delay decisions out of fear. They interpret uncertainty as danger, and without realizing it, they re-enter the same identity loop. Not because they failed, but because they defaulted. Now listen carefully. This is not about blame. It is about recognition, because the moment you see the pattern clearly, you are no longer fully inside it, and that is where change begins. Now I want you to start noticing something in your own experience. I want you to begin a recognition loop, a simple internal question. I've done that before. I just didn't notice it. Not as judgment, but as awareness. I've done that before. I just didn't notice it. For example, that moment you assumed something wouldn't work before trying it. That moment you expected delay before action even began. That moment you doubted success even while moving toward it. These are not random moments. They are identity expressions, and when you begin to see them clearly, you stop identifying with them unconsciously. Now here is a subtle but powerful shift. Most people think identity is something they must build. They try to construct a new version of themselves. They try to force confidence, force discipline, force positivity. But forcing creates tension, and tension reveals misalignment. Because true identity is not built, it is chosen and reinforced repeatedly. Let that sink in slowly. Not built, chosen, reinforced, again and again. Now think about this in terms of your daily life. Every time you react the same way to uncertainty, you reinforce an identity. Every time you assume lack instead of possibility, you reinforce an identity. Every time you return to doubt after inspiration, you reinforce an identity. Not dramatically, but subtly, quietly, consistently. And that consistency is what shapes everything around you. Now here is where the deeper realization appears. You are not trying to become someone new. You are selecting who you repeatedly return to. And that return point is everything. Because life does not respond to your intentions in isolation. It responds to your dominant identity cycle. So ask yourself now, what identity do you return to when you are not thinking about it? Not the version you present, not the version you hope for, but the version that appears automatically. Because that version is currently writing your reality. And here is the shift that begins to change everything. The moment you stop trying to fix yourself, you stop reinforcing the idea that you are broken. And when you stop reinforcing brokenness, you create space for alignment. Not effort, not struggle, not correction. Alignment. Now take a slow breath with this idea. Nothing about you needs to be replaced. Something within you simply needs to be brought back into coherence. And coherence is not force. It is repetition of the right state. Now, before we move forward, I want to leave you with a subtle but powerful truth. The identity you are living right now is not permanent. It is not fixed. It is not final. It is simply the one you have repeated most consistently. And anything that is repeated can be replaced through awareness and choice. Not overnight, not emotionally dramatic, but quietly, consistently, deliberately. And now you begin to see something clearly. Your life is not a reflection of your potential. It is a reflection of your repetition. And repetition is always a choice, even when it feels automatic. So as this chapter settles, do not rush to change everything at once. Instead, begin noticing. Begin observing, begin recognizing the identity you are currently reinforcing without awareness. Because awareness is the first interruption in repetition. And interruption is where new identity becomes possible. And once you see this clearly, you begin to understand something deeper about every experience you've ever had. That nothing was ever trying to punish you. Nothing was ever trying to delay you. It was simply responding to who you were being consistently. And now that you see it, you are no longer only reacting to identity. You are beginning to choose it. But before we explore how meaning itself shapes reality at a deeper level than identity alone, there is another invisible mechanism at play that most people never question. Because even when identity shifts, reality does not always respond immediately. And that delay holds one of the most misunderstood principles in manifestation. You are not broken, you are not behind, you are simply entering a calibration phase between identity and reflection. And next, we uncover why meaning itself is the force that determines how fast that reflection arrives. Chapter 3: The Power of Meaning. Why nothing has inherent power over you. There is something most people never question, and because they never question it, it quietly governs their entire life. It is this. They believe events have inherent meaning, that something is good or bad on its own, that something is success or failure on its own, that something means they are behind or means they are chosen. But pause for a moment. What if none of that is true? What if nothing in your life has meaning until you assign it? Let that land slowly, because this single shift begins to dissolve the structure most people build their identity on. Nothing means anything until you give it meaning. Say that internally with me. Nothing means anything until I give it meaning. Now notice what happens when you actually sit with that idea. A rejection is not inherently rejection. A delay is not inherently delay. A failure is not inherently failure. They are events, neutral occurrences moving through time. But the mind does something immediately after every event. It assigns interpretation, and interpretation becomes identity fuel. Let's slow this down. You send a message and don't get a reply. One identity says, they are busy. Another identity says, I did something wrong. Same event, different meaning, completely different internal reality. And here is where everything begins to shift. The event did not change you. The meaning did. Now I want you to notice something subtle in your own experience. How quickly do you assign meaning before you even become aware of it? A pause in communication becomes distance. A setback becomes confirmation. A mistake becomes identity. And most of the time, it happens so fast you never see the moment of interpretation. But here is the key realization. It didn't mean anything until you gave it a meaning. Say it again internally. It didn't mean anything until I gave it meaning. Now let's go deeper, because meaning is not just interpretation. Meaning is emotional direction. It determines whether you collapse or expand, whether you contract into fear or open into possibility. And because of this, meaning becomes one of the most powerful forces shaping your reality. Not the event itself, but the story you attach to it. Now pause for a moment and reflect. How many times in your life have you labeled something as bad too quickly, only to realize later it redirected you, protected you, or prepared you? At the time, it felt final, but in hindsight, it was neutral. And that is the illusion. You are not reacting to reality. You are reacting to your interpretation of reality. Now here is where a subtle but powerful micro-realization begins to appear. Watch this closely. The same event can collapse one timeline or expand another. Let that sit. The same rejection can become evidence of inadequacy or redirection toward alignment. The same delay can become frustration or recalibration toward something better suited. The same failure can become identity contraction or strategic correction. Nothing changed externally, but everything changed internally. And internal meaning determines external trajectory. Now I want you to imagine something for a moment. Two people experience the exact same setback. One person interprets it as proof that nothing is working. They withdraw, they slow down, they become uncertain. The other person interprets it as feedback. They adjust, they refine, they continue. Same event, two different timelines begin forming immediately. And neither timeline is created by the event itself. It is created by meaning. Now let's bring this closer to your own experience. Think about a moment recently where something didn't go as expected. Pause for a second. Now ask yourself gently, what meaning did I assign before I even realized I was assigning one? Because in most cases, the meaning arrives faster than awareness. And that meaning becomes the emotional reaction. And that reaction becomes the identity reinforcement. And that reinforcement becomes the next decision. And that decision becomes the next result, all from one invisible interpretation. Now here is the shift that begins to dissolve that chain. You begin to slow down meaning-making, not suppress it, not ignore it, but observe it. Because observation creates space between event and identity, and in that space, you regain choice. Now listen closely to this next part. There is no event in your life that has ever been purely good or purely bad. Only interpreted, only assigned, only framed. And framing determines experience. Let that settle. Framing determines experience. Now imagine what happens when you begin to consciously choose meaning instead of automatically reacting to it. A delay becomes preparation. A rejection becomes direction. A failure becomes recalibration. Uncertainty becomes transition. The event stays the same, but your internal reality shifts completely. And this is where most people unknowingly miss the deeper layer of manifestation. They focus on changing external circumstances, while the real transformation happens in meaning assignment. Now I want to introduce something subtle. Every meaning you assign either contracts your timeline or expands it. If meaning creates fear, resistance, or identity collapse, your timeline slows, tightens, compresses. If meaning creates clarity, curiosity, or openness, your timeline expands, flows, reorganizes. Same life, different interpretation, different trajectory. Now pause again, because this is the turning point of this chapter. What if nothing in your life is actually stopping you? What if it is simply being filtered through meanings that compress your movement forward? Because reality is not fixed in how it affects you. It is flexible in how you interpret it. And interpretation is always happening, whether you are aware of it or not. Now here is the deeper realization underneath everything we've discussed so far. Identity is shaped by repetition, but repetition is shaped by meaning. And meaning determines emotional response. And emotional response determines what you repeat, which means meaning sits at the foundation of everything you are experiencing. So when you begin to shift meaning, you're not just changing thoughts, you are changing trajectory. Now take a slow breath with this, because this is where awareness begins to mature. You are no longer just someone experiencing life, you are someone interpreting it. And interpretation is power, not in control of events, but in shaping what those events become inside you, and that internal shaping is what reality responds to next. Now before we move forward, hold this gently. Nothing is happening to you in its final form. It is happening through your meaning of it, and that meaning is adjustable, always. Now as we close this chapter, there is one final realization to sit with. The same moment you once labeled as setback may actually have been the exact turning point that separated one version of your life from another. But you only see that when meaning changes. And when meaning changes, the past changes. Not because events changed, but because your understanding of them did. And when understanding shifts, so does the direction of everything that follows. Now, as this settles, we move into something even more subtle. Because even when you assign empowering meanings, there is still a delay between inner change and outer reflection. A gap most people misinterpret as failure, but in reality, it is calibration. And that calibration shapes everything you will ever experience next. You are beginning to see that meaning shapes experience more than events ever could. But now, we go deeper into the delay itself, the space between inner shift and outer reflection, and why that delay is not resistance, but alignment in progress. Chapter 4. The Calibration Gap. Why reality lags behind your shift. There is a moment in almost every transformation where something quietly changes inside you. You don't always notice it at first. It might happen after a realization, after a decision, after a breakdown that forced clarity, or a quiet moment where something finally clicked in your understanding. Internally, something shifts. You see differently, you think differently, you respond differently. And for a brief moment, it feels like everything should change immediately. But then you look at your external life, and nothing has changed yet. And this is where most people misunderstand everything. They assume the shift didn't work, but what is actually happening is something far more precise. You are in the calibration gap. Let that land slowly. The calibration gap is the space between internal transformation and external reflection, between who you have become internally and what reality has had time to mirror back. And most people collapse inside this space. Not because they are wrong, not because they failed, but because they misinterpret the delay. Now pause for a moment and really consider this. If reality is reflective, it cannot update faster than the signal it is receiving. It must adjust, it must reorganize, it must align external structures with internal frequency. And that takes time. Think of it like this. When you plant a seed into the soil, nothing appears above the surface immediately. You don't see the roots forming. You don't see the microscopic adjustments happening beneath the ground. But something is happening, constantly, quietly, precisely. The seed is not failing to become a tree. It is calibrating into one. And yet, most people would dig it up after a few days because they don't see evidence fast enough. Now reflect on that for a moment. How often have you done the same with your own life? A decision was made, a mindset shifted, a new version of you began forming internally. But because the external world didn't respond quickly enough, doubt entered. And when doubt enters the calibration phase, it interrupts the process. This is why this understanding is so important. Delay is not denial, it is calibration. Say that internally with me. Delay is not denial, it is calibration. Again, delay is not denial, it is calibration. Now listen closely. This delay is not empty space. It is active restructuring, relationships adjusting, opportunities repositioning, your behavior subtly shifting, your perception recalibrating what you notice and respond to. Everything is reorganizing around the new internal frequency you are holding. But here is the subtle truth most people miss. The internal shift is instant. The external shift is sequential, meaning your identity can change in a moment, but your environment changes in layers. Now I want you to slow down with this idea, because this is where emotional discipline becomes essential. In the calibration gap, your internal state becomes the most important factor in the entire process. Not action, not effort, not even visualization, but emotional stability. Because this is where most people unknowingly undo their own progress. They shift internally, then immediately look outward for confirmation. And when confirmation does not appear fast enough, they revert. They return to old thinking, old doubts, old emotional patterns, and in doing so, they reset the calibration process. Not because nothing was happening, but because they destabilized what was being formed. Let that sink in. You do not ruin manifestation by not doing enough. You ruin it by abandoning the state too early. Now pause here, because I want you to notice something subtle in your own experience. Have you ever had a moment where you felt completely aligned, where everything felt clear, certain, inevitable? And then a few days later, you started questioning it again, not because the idea changed, but because reality had not yet caught up. That is the calibration gap, and the danger is not the gap itself. The danger is emotional regression inside the gap. Now here is a deeper layer, The calibration gap is not linear. It is not a straight line from internal change to external result. It is more like layers of unfolding alignment. First, your perception changes. Then your decisions adjust. Then your behavior subtly shifts. Then your environment begins to respond. And only after all of that does the external world fully reflect the internal shift. So if you only look at the final stage, you will always think nothing is happening. But if you understand the process, you begin to recognize early signs of recalibration. A different reaction than before. A different thought pattern under pressure. A different emotional response to the same situation. These are not small things. They are evidence of alignment already in motion. Now let's go even deeper. The calibration gap is where most people unknowingly sabotage their timeline, because instead of holding steady, they start checking. Checking results, checking progress, checking signs, checking if it is working, but checking is not neutral. Checking is a state, and often it is a state of doubt, and doubt creates resistance in the very system that is trying to reorganize. So instead of allowing calibration, they interrupt it. Now listen closely to this next realization. The moment you stop needing immediate confirmation, you begin to stabilize your signal, and stabilization is what allows reality to reorganize faster. Now I want to introduce a subtle shift in perspective. What if delay is not a problem at all? What if delay is the evidence that something is actively changing? Because if nothing were changing internally, there would be nothing for reality to adjust to. So delay is not emptiness. Delay is movement you cannot yet see. And that is why patience is not passive here. It is active alignment. It is the discipline of not collapsing back into old identity before new identity fully anchors. Now take a slow breath with that, because here is the key emotional skill of this entire phase. You must learn to stay aligned without evidence, not because evidence is unimportant, but because evidence is delayed. And if your alignment depends on immediate proof, you will always abandon it too early. Now, as we begin to close this chapter, I want you to hold one final thought. Most people do not fail at manifestation because they never shifted internally. They fail because they cannot survive the silence that follows the shift. The quiet period, the invisible period, the calibration period, and in that silence, they interpret absence as failure. But in truth, absence is construction. Something is forming, something is adjusting, something is moving toward visibility, but only for those who do not interrupt it. And here is the final question this chapter leaves you with. What if the moment you decide it is not working is the exact moment you interrupt what was already working? Because in the calibration gap, your interpretation becomes your biggest influence. And most people do not realize this until it is too late. So the real question is not whether it is working. The question is, can you remain stable long enough to see it appear? And now, as we move forward, we enter the part of the journey where most people begin to lose control of their emotional state entirely. Not because they lack knowledge, but because emotion itself becomes the test. And how you handle it determines everything that follows. You now understand that delay is calibration, not failure. But what happens when emotional resistance enters the process, and why most people unknowingly amplify what they are trying to release? Chapter 5. Embrace the bad, the hidden role of emotional resistance. There is something most people misunderstand about emotional experience. They assume emotions are problems to solve, something to fix, something to get rid of, something to move past as quickly as possible. So when something uncomfortable arises, they immediately resist it. They distract themselves, they overthink it, they suppress it, they try to replace it with something better. But notice something carefully here. The emotion does not actually disappear. It intensifies. And this is where the hidden mechanism begins to reveal itself. Suppression does not remove emotion. It strengthens it. Let that land slowly. Suppression does not remove emotion. It strengthens it. Now pause for a moment and think about your own experience. Have you ever tried not to feel anxious, only to become more anxious? Have you ever tried not to think about something, only to think about it more? Have you ever tried to force positivity, only to feel more internal resistance underneath it? If so, you are not broken. You are simply encountering how emotion actually works. Because emotion is not something that disappears when ignored. It is something that resolves when fully seen. Now let's slow this down. Imagine anxiety as energy in motion inside the body. When you resist it, you're essentially tightening around it. You're saying internally, this should not be here. And that resistance creates friction, and friction sustains the very thing you are trying to escape. But when you stop resisting, something very different happens. You allow it to exist without interpretation, without labeling it as bad, without turning it into a story, without trying to change it immediately. You simply observe it. And in observation, something begins to shift. Because what is fully observed no longer needs to persist in the same intensity. Now here is the core realization of this chapter. Let it complete itself. Say that internally with me. Let it complete itself. Again. Let it complete itself. Now listen closely. Most emotional cycles do not last as long as people think. What extends them is interruption, not the emotion itself. Think about anxiety for a moment. Anxiety is often a wave. It rises, it peaks, it falls. But when you resist the rising, you stretch the wave. When you avoid the peak, you reinforce the cycle. When you distract during the fall, you restart the pattern. So the emotion never completes. It loops. Now imagine what happens when you do nothing to interrupt it. You feel it rise. You feel it fully. You allow it to peak. You allow it to fall naturally. No story added. No resistance applied. No meaning assigned. Just awareness. And what you begin to notice is that the emotion resolves faster than expected. Not because you fixed it, but because you allowed it to finish. Now pause here for a moment, because this is where a deeper realization begins to emerge. Most people are not experiencing emotional intensity because they are overwhelmed. They are experiencing it because they are resisting completion. Let that sink in. And this resistance is often invisible. It sounds like, I shouldn't feel this way. This needs to go away. Why am I still like this? I need to fix this now. But each of these thoughts is not neutral. They are forms of interruption, and interruption keeps emotion alive. Now let's go even deeper. There is a paradox here that most people never notice. The more urgently you try to escape an emotion, the more central it becomes in your experience. Because attention plus resistance equals amplification. But attention without resistance equals dissolution. Let that difference settle. Now I want you to reflect on something personal. Think about a time when you felt overwhelmed emotionally. Now ask yourself gently, did the emotion intensify because it was present, or because you were fighting it? This is not about blame. It is about recognition. Because recognition changes everything. Now here is a subtle but important shift. You do not need to overcome emotions. You need to stop interrupting them. And when you stop interrupting them, they begin to resolve themselves. This is why awareness is so powerful. Not because it removes emotion, but because it removes resistance to emotion. Now listen carefully. There is a moment during emotional observation where something changes. At first, you feel the intensity, but if you stay with it without reaction, you begin to notice a shift underneath the intensity. The sensation is still there, but the charge begins to soften. Not because it disappeared, but because it is no longer being reinforced. And in that space, something very important becomes available. Clarity. Now let's go deeper into a practical example. Imagine someone experiencing anxiety before a decision. At first, they feel tightness in the chest, racing thoughts, urgency to fix the feeling. Their instinct is to escape it, but instead, they pause. They observe the sensation. They allow it to exist without labeling it as dangerous. And slowly, the intensity begins to shift, not instantly, not dramatically, but naturally, because the system is completing itself instead of being interrupted. Now here is the key phrase that anchors this entire chapter. Let it complete itself. Now I want you to understand something very important about emotional mastery. It is not about control. It is about non-interference. Because what you stop interfering with stops needing to persist. Now take a slow breath with that idea, because this is where emotional neutrality begins to emerge. Not suppression, not positivity, not forced calm, but neutrality. A state where emotions can move through you without becoming identity. And this is where most people begin to transform without realizing it. Because once emotion is no longer resisted, it no longer defines you. You begin to experience feelings without becoming them, and that is a fundamental shift in consciousness. Now, as we begin to close this chapter, I want to leave you with a subtle but powerful realization. What if emotional intensity is not the problem at all? What if the real issue is the belief that it should not be there? Because the moment you label emotion as wrong, you create resistance. And resistance creates persistence. But when you remove the label, you remove the struggle. And when struggle is removed, what remains is simply experience. Now here is where everything begins to deepen. Because emotional neutrality is not emptiness. It is not numbness. It is not disconnection. It is something far more powerful. It is stability in the presence of movement. And most people have never experienced that state long enough to understand what it actually does to perception, identity, and reality itself. Because when emotions no longer control direction, something else begins to take over. Something quieter, something more stable, something that does not react, but observes. And in that state, reality begins to respond differently. But before we explore that fully, there is something even more fundamental beneath emotional neutrality itself, a state where effort dissolves. Not because you are trying to be calm, but because calm becomes your baseline. And that is where we go next. You have learned that emotions are not enemies, but processes that complete themselves when left uninterrupted. But now we go deeper into what happens when you no longer resist emotion at all, and why that leads into a state of natural stillness that most people mistake for manifestation itself. Chapter 6. Relaxation is manifestation, not action. There is a misunderstanding that sits underneath almost everything people do in life. It is the belief that effort creates outcomes, that the more you push, the more you force, the more you do, the closer you get to what you want. And in the physical world, that often appears to be true. But when it comes to inner alignment and the way reality reflects consciousness, something very different is happening, because effort does not create alignment. State does. Let that land slowly. Effort does not create alignment. State does. Now pause for a moment and feel the difference between those two ideas. Effort is movement outward. State is position inward. Effort is trying. State is being. And most people spend their entire lives confusing the two. Now I want you to imagine something. Two people want the same outcome. One person begins to push harder. They research more. They try more techniques. They force more visualization. They attempt to control every detail. Their mind becomes active. Their body becomes tense. Their expectations rise. And underneath it all, there is urgency. A quiet feeling of, this needs to work. Now the second person. They also take action, but their action is different. It is not driven by urgency. It is grounded in calm certainty. They move, but without inner tension. They decide, but without emotional desperation. They continue their life, but without obsessing over outcome. And here is the subtle truth most people miss. Both may take similar actions externally, but internally, they are broadcasting completely different signals. Now pause here and think about this carefully. Which one feels more aligned with trust? Which one feels more stable? Which one feels like it already belongs in the outcome it wants? Now let that deepen. Because manifestation is not about increasing effort, it is about stabilizing state. And state is what the subconscious responds to. Not intensity, not urgency, not pressure. State. Now let's go deeper. The subconscious mind does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you consistently embody. And embodiment happens in relaxation. Not laziness, not avoidance, not apathy, but relaxed presence. A state where nothing is being forced internally. Where thought is clear, not chaotic. Where emotion is steady, not reactive. Where action is natural, not strained. Now I want you to notice something subtle in your own experience. Think about a moment when something worked out easily for you. Not because you forced it, but because you were not over-attached to the outcome. There was flow, there was clarity, there was a sense of natural timing. And now compare that to a moment when you tried very hard and everything felt blocked, delayed, or strained. What was different? It was not just the situation, it was your internal state. Now here is the core realization of this chapter. You do not attract from effort, you attract from state. Say that internally with me. You do not attract from effort, you attract from state. Again. You do not attract from effort, you attract from state. Now let that settle into your body, not just your mind. Because this is where everything begins to reorganize. Relaxation is not passive, it is receptive. It is the state in which the mind stops interfering with what is already unfolding. And in that non-interference, something very important happens. You begin to perceive differently. You notice opportunities without forcing them. You respond instead of react. You act without internal resistance. And that shift changes everything. Now let's slow this down even further. Over-efforting creates noise, and noise blocks subtle perception. When the mind is tense, it narrows. When the mind is urgent, it filters reality through fear. When the mind is desperate, it only sees lack. But when the mind is relaxed, something opens. Awareness expands. Interpretation softens. Possibility becomes visible again. Now I want you to think about this carefully. How many opportunities have you missed not because they weren't there, but because your state was too tense to notice them? Now here is a deeper layer. Relaxation is not just emotional comfort, it is access. Access to clarity, access to intuition, access to subconscious alignment. Because the subconscious does not speak loudly, it speaks clearly, but only when the surface noise settles. Now pause here for a moment, because this is where most people misunderstand relaxation. They think it means doing nothing. But true relaxation is not inactivity. It is non-resistance during activity. It is doing things without internal struggle. It is moving through life without tightening against it. Now imagine two versions of you again. One version wakes up and immediately feels behind. There is pressure, there is urgency, there is mental noise before the day even begins. Every task feels heavy. Every decision feels like effort. Now another version wakes up and feels steady, not because everything is perfect, but because internally there is no resistance to the moment. They still act, they still move, they still engage, but without contraction. And this difference, although subtle, completely changes outcomes over time. Now here is the deeper truth beneath all of this. The universe does not respond to how much you strain. It responds to the state from which you act. Now let that settle, because if this is true, then pushing harder is not always progress. Sometimes it is distortion, and relaxation is not a break from manifestation. It is the foundation of it. Now take a slow breath with this idea, because this is where something begins to soften inside you. The need to force, the need to control, the need to rush outcomes into existence. And in that softening, clarity begins to emerge. Now, as we begin to close this chapter, I want you to hold one final realization. Everything you have been calling effort may have actually been resistance, and everything you have been calling ease may have actually been alignment. Now ask yourself gently, what if the version of you are trying to become is not found through more effort, but through less interference? Because when interference drops, state stabilizes. And when state stabilizes, reality begins to reorganize itself around you. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. And yet, there is still a deeper layer underneath relaxation itself. A way of seeing life that removes pressure not just from action, but from existence itself. A shift in perspective so profound that nothing feels like it is happening to you anymore. And that is where we go next. You now understand that relaxation is not inactivity, but alignment through non-resistance. But next, we step into a higher perspective, where life itself is no longer experienced as pressure or struggle, but as observation from a higher awareness. Chapter 7. The Spiritual Bird's Eye. View, nothing is happening to you. There is a level of awareness most people live just beneath, without ever fully stepping into it. It is the level where life feels personal, where events feel targeted, where timing feels unfair, where situations feel like they are happening to you. And from that level of perception, life can feel heavy, unpredictable, chaotic, sometimes even unjust. But what if that entire experience is not the truth of what is happening, but only the level from which you are observing it? Let that land slowly, because there is another way to see everything. A higher perspective, a wider lens, a bird's eye view. Now imagine, just for a moment, you are rising above your current experience, not escaping it, not denying it, but observing it from a higher vantage point. From up here, the details do not disappear, but they reorganize. Patterns become visible. Connections begin to appear. What once felt random starts to form structure. And from this perspective, something very important becomes obvious. Nothing is happening to you. Everything is simply happening. Let that settle. Nothing is happening to you. Everything is happening. Now pause for a moment and notice what shifts internally when you hear that. The tension of personal attack begins to soften. The urgency to resist begins to loosen. the emotional contraction begins to widen. Because when something is no longer against you, you no longer need to fight it. Now let's go deeper. Think about a moment in your life that once felt like a setback, a delay, a rejection, a failure, a sudden change you did not expect. At the time, it likely felt disruptive, maybe even painful. But now, imagine viewing that same moment from a greater distance, from a wider timeline, from a perspective where you can see not just that moment, but what came after it, and what came after that. Now something begins to shift. That setback no longer looks like a wall. It starts to look like a redirection, a rerouting, a repositioning, a necessary adjustment in trajectory. And this is where perception begins to transform reality itself. Because meaning is not fixed, it evolves with perspective. Now here is the subtle realization. Most suffering is not created by events themselves, but by the interpretation that the event is final, permanent, personal, directed at you. But when you step into the bird's eye view, you begin to see something else entirely. You begin to see movement, not isolation, not punishment, but flow. Now let's slow this down even further. Imagine your life as a long sequence of interconnected events. At ground level, each event feels separate. A breakup feels separate from a job change. A rejection feels separate from a future opportunity. A delay feels separate from eventual success. But from above, they begin to connect. One adjustment leads to another. One closure creates space for expansion. One redirection quietly becomes preparation, and what once looked chaotic begins to look coordinated. Now pause here, because this is the shift most people never fully integrate. They interpret life in fragments. But life does not operate in fragments. It operates in sequences. And sequences only make sense when seen from distance. Now I want you to reflect on something gently. How many times in your life did something not make sense in the moment, but later revealed itself as necessary? Not convenient, not comfortable, but necessary. And if that pattern has repeated even once, then it is already evidence that your current interpretation is not the full picture. Now let's go deeper into the observer state. There is a version of awareness where you are no longer fully inside every emotional wave. You still feel, you still experience, but you are no longer entirely consumed by the interpretation of those feelings. There is a part of you that watches, quietly, steadily, without urgency. And in that watching, space is created. Space between event and reaction. Space between emotion and identity. Space between experience and conclusion. And in that space, something powerful emerges. Choice. Now here is the core realization of this chapter. You are not the story happening to you. You are the awareness witnessing the story unfold. Let that land slowly. Now I want you to notice something subtle. When you believe life is happening to you, you become reactive. You contract into survival. You search for control. You interpret events as threats or losses. But when you begin to see life as simply happening, you shift into observation. And observation changes everything, because observation does not require resistance. It only requires awareness. Now let's bring this into something practical. A setback occurs. Ground-level perspective says, this is a problem. Bird's eye view says, this is a movement in progress. Ground-level perspective says, this is stopping me. Bird's eye view says, this is repositioning me. Ground-level perspective says, this is the end of something. Bird's eye view says, this is part of something larger unfolding. Same event, different altitude. different experience of reality. Now pause here, because this is where emotional relief begins to enter. Not because the situation changes, but because the meaning expands, and expansion always reduces pressure. Now let's go deeper one more layer. When you stop personalizing events, you stop collapsing into them, and when you stop collapsing into them, you begin to see direction inside them, and direction is always present, even when it is not immediately visible. Now I want you to hold this gently. Not everything that feels like loss is loss. Not everything that feels like delay is delay. Not everything that feels like disruption is disruption. Sometimes it is orchestration. Now, as this chapter begins to close, I want to leave you with a final expansion of awareness. What if nothing in your life has ever been random? What if every moment you once labeled as interruption was actually part of a coordinated unfolding? Not chaotic, not accidental, not personal in the way you once believed, but structured, aligned, intelligent in ways you could not yet see from the ground. Because from the ground, you see fragments, but from the bird's eye view, you see design. And as this understanding settles, something within you begins to soften again, not into passivity, but into trust, a deeper kind of trust. Not trust that everything will go the way you expect, but trust that everything is already moving in a direction you cannot yet fully see. And from that space, you no longer need to resist what is happening, because you understand what is happening is part of something larger than the moment itself. And now, with this expanded awareness, we move into a deeper layer of identity itself, because even from the bird's eye view, there is still a question beneath all experience. Who are you when the story is no longer personal? And that question begins to reshape everything you thought you knew about yourself. You're beginning to see life as coordinated rather than random. But next, we go deeper into identity itself, the split between who you think you are and who you are performing as without awareness. Chapter 8, the identity split, who you are versus who you perform as. There is a tension most people carry without realizing it. It is not loud, it is not obvious, it is not something you can easily point to, but it is always there. It shows up in hesitation, in overthinking, in inconsistency, in the feeling of being slightly off in certain moments of life. And the reason for that tension is simple. There are two versions of you operating at the same time. Who you are and who you are performing as. Let that land slowly. Who you are and who you are performing as. Now pause for a moment and notice what that actually means. Because most people assume they are one unified identity, but in reality, there is often a quiet split. One version of you exists internally. It is your default state, your unobserved thoughts, your automatic emotional responses, your private interpretations of life. And another version of you exists externally. It is how you present, how you act under observation, how you try to be perceived, how you adjust yourself for outcomes. And the gap between these two versions is where instability lives. Now let's go deeper. Think about confidence for a moment. Most people try to perform confidence. They adjust posture, they change tone, they repeat affirmations, they act as if. And sometimes, in short bursts, it works, but it doesn't last. Because performance is not identity. Performance is effort applied on top of misalignment. Now contrast that with embodied confidence. This is not something performed, it is something stabilized internally. It does not require correction in the moment. It does not collapse under observation. It does not depend on external validation to remain intact. It simply is. Now here is the key realization. Performance collapses, Identity stabilizes. Let that repeat internally. Performance collapses. Identity stabilizes. Again. Performance collapses. Identity stabilizes. Now pause here, because this is where most people begin to recognize something uncomfortable. They are not living from identity. They are maintaining performance. And performance requires energy, constant adjustment, constant monitoring, constant self-correction. What am I supposed to be right now? How should I act here? Did I say that correctly? Do they see me the right way? And over time, this creates internal exhaustion, not because life is difficult, but because identity is not stable. Now let's slow this down even further. There is a moment in every day where the split becomes visible. It happens when no one is watching, when you stop performing, when you are alone, when the pressure of perception is gone. And in that moment, your true default state returns. Not the version you try to be, but the version you repeatedly return to. Now here is the subtle but important truth. That return point is your identity. Not your intentions, not your aspirations, not your public presentation, but your default internal state when effort is removed. Now reflect on this gently. How different are your private thoughts from your public behavior? How often do you act one way externally, but feel another way internally? And more importantly, which one wins over time? Because identity is not what you declare. It is what persists when performance drops. Now let's go deeper into this split. Most instability in life does not come from lack of knowledge. It comes from contradiction. You want stability, but internally rehearse anxiety. You want success, but internally expect failure. You want connection, but internally anticipate rejection. And externally, you may try to override this, but the internal pattern remains active. And when internal and external conflict, the system fragments. Now here is where everything begins to clarify. You do not need to become someone else. You need to remove the split. You need to align performance with identity, or more accurately, you need to stop performing altogether and stabilize being. Now I want you to notice something subtle in your own experience. Think about moments where you felt completely natural. No forcing, no overthinking, no internal monitoring. You simply responded. You simply existed. Those moments feel different because there is no split. There is coherence, and coherence always feels lighter. Now let's bring this into behavior. If you are confident internally but doubtful externally, you are split. If you are calm internally but reactive externally, you are split. If you are certain internally but constantly seeking reassurance externally, you are split. And that split creates instability in results, emotions, and perception. Now here is the core realization of this chapter. Performance collapses. Identity stabilizes. Say it again internally. Performance collapses. Identity stabilizes. Now let's go deeper. Performance is fragile because it depends on control. Identity is stable because it depends on repetition. And repetition always wins. So the question is not, how do I perform better? The question is, what identity am I repeatedly returning to? Because what you return to becomes what you are. Now pause here for a moment, because this is where a deeper shift begins. Instead of trying to maintain a version of yourself, you begin observing what version naturally maintains itself. And that observation is powerful, because awareness creates interruption in unconscious performance, and interruption creates space for alignment. Now let's slow this down into something very simple. Every time you act in contradiction to your internal state, you reinforce split identity. Every time you act in alignment with your internal state, you reinforce coherence, and coherence always stabilizes faster than performance. Now, as we begin to close this chapter, I want to leave you with a final realization. You are not unstable because you lack discipline. You are unstable because you are split between identities. One that is real internally and one that is performed externally. And the gap between those two versions is where inconsistency lives. But the moment those two begin to merge, something shifts. Effort reduces. Clarity increases. Behavior becomes natural, and life begins to feel less like acting and more like being. Now, as this understanding settles, we move into something even more subtle, because even when identity becomes aligned, there is still a deeper question underneath behavior itself. What happens when reality itself does not respond to intensity, but only to stability over time? And that is where we go next. You now see that performance creates instability and identity creates coherence. But next, we go deeper into why reality responds not to intensity of effort, but to the consistency of your internal state over time. Chapter 9. Reality responds to stability, not intensity. There is a pattern most people unknowingly live by. It feels logical, it feels motivating, it even feels powerful in the moment. It is the belief that intensity creates change, that if you try harder, push harder, feel more strongly, you will finally break through. And in short bursts, it seems to work. A surge of motivation, a wave of inspiration, a sudden commitment to change everything. For a moment, it feels like transformation is happening, but then it fades, and you're back where you started. Now pause for a moment and notice something important. If intensity alone created lasting change, your life would already reflect every moment of motivation you've ever had. But it doesn't, which means something deeper is at play. Because reality does not respond to intensity, it responds to stability. Let that land slowly. Reality does not respond to intensity, it responds to stability. Now repeat that internally. Reality does not respond to intensity, it responds to stability. Again, reality does not respond to intensity, it responds to stability. Now let's slow this down. Intensity is emotional. It rises quickly. It burns brightly. It feels powerful. But it is unstable by nature. Stability is different. It does not spike. It does not collapse. It does not depend on mood or moment. It continues. Quietly. Consistently. Predictably. And reality is not shaped by emotional peaks. It is shaped by sustained patterns. Now think about this in your own life. How many times have you made a powerful decision, only to abandon it days later when the emotional state changed? A new diet, a new routine, a new mindset, a new identity declaration. In the moment of intensity, it feels certain. But certainty built on emotion is temporary, because emotion fluctuates. And when emotion shifts, behavior follows. Now contrast that with stability. Not dramatic change, not emotional highs, but steady return. The version of you that keeps showing up even when nothing feels exciting. The version of you that continues even when motivation disappears. The version of you that does not require emotional validation to remain consistent. Now let's go deeper. Imagine two people building the same goal. One person works in bursts. They push hard for a few days, then they rest, then they doubt, then they push again. Their effort is powerful, but inconsistent. Their identity fluctuates with their emotion. The second person moves differently. Their effort is moderate, but consistent. They do not rely on emotional peaks. They rely on return. And here is the subtle truth. The second person always outperforms the first over time, not because they are more talented, but because they are more stable. Now pause here, because this is where realization begins to settle deeper. Most people do not fail because they lack intensity. They fail because they cannot sustain identity across time. They become one version of themselves on good days and another version on difficult days. And that inconsistency creates fragmentation. Now let's bring this closer to awareness. Think about your own patterns. What version of you appears when you feel confident? What version appears when you feel uncertain? What version appears when nothing external is reinforcing your belief? And now ask yourself gently, which version shows up most often? Because that version is shaping everything else. Now here is the core realization of this chapter. Reality responds to stability, not intensity. Say it again internally. Reality responds to stability, not intensity. Again, reality responds to stability, not intensity. Now let's go deeper. Stability is not about suppressing emotion. It is not about being rigid. It is not about forcing consistency. It is about return. The ability to return to alignment again and again, regardless of temporary emotional fluctuation. Because emotion will always fluctuate, but identity does not need to. Now I want you to notice something subtle. Every time you return to doubt after clarity, you weaken stability. Every time you return to clarity after doubt, you strengthen stability. And over time, what you return to most becomes your baseline. Now let's slow this down even further. Stability is not created in moments of inspiration. It is created in ordinary moments, when nothing is exciting, when nothing is urgent, when nothing is pushing you emotionally, and you still remain consistent. That is where reality begins to reorganize, not in peaks, but in persistence. Now here is where everything begins to connect. If identity is what you repeatedly return to, and reality responds to stability, then your entire life is shaped not by your best moments, but by your most consistent ones. Let that sink in. Not your highest energy, not your strongest motivation, but your most repeated state. Now as we begin to close this chapter, I want to leave you with a simple but confronting question. Not to pressure you, but to reveal something important. What version of you do you return to daily? Not occasionally, not ideally, not when everything is aligned, but daily. When you are tired, when you are uncertain, when nothing is pushing you forward. What version of you remains? Because that version is the one reality is currently responding to. And now that you see this clearly, you begin to understand why change has not been about effort. It has been about return. And return is a decision made in silence, in repetition, in stability. And yet even stability is not the final layer, because there is something beyond consistency itself. A state where identity no longer feels like effort at all, where alignment is no longer something you return to, but something you naturally live from. And that is where we go next. You now understand that reality responds to stability, not intensity. But next, we go deeper into identity embodiment itself, where stability becomes so integrated that effort disappears and alignment becomes natural. Chapter 10. Become the version of you that reality cannot ignore. At some point in every transformation, there is a final shift. Not a new idea, not a new technique, not a new strategy, but a settling, a quiet integration where everything you once learned stops feeling like something you are applying and starts becoming something you are. Let that land slowly, because this is where everything comes together. You have explored frequency. You have explored identity. You have explored meaning. You have explored emotional resistance. You have explored relaxation, perspective, calibration, and stability. And now, all of it begins to collapse into one simple realization. You're not trying to change your life anymore. You are becoming the version of you that reality naturally responds to. Let that sink in. Now pause for a moment, because this is not about effort anymore. This is about permanence of identity. Not the version of you that appears in moments of inspiration, but the version of you that remains when everything else is silent. Now think about something for a moment. In every field, in every domain, in every craft, there are people who no longer seem to be trying. They are not performing confidence. They are not forcing certainty. They are not chasing validation. They simply operate from a level that feels established. They have become the standard in their environment, not because they say they are, but because their presence reflects it. Now observe this carefully. They did not arrive there through intensity. They arrived there through integration, through repetition, through stability, through identity alignment over time, and eventually, the effort disappeared, because embodiment took over. Now let's bring everything you have learned into one unified understanding. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotional spikes. You are not your temporary states of inspiration or doubt. You are the pattern that remains when all of that settles. Let that land slowly. Now recall what has been revealed throughout this journey. You do not manifest through effort. You manifest through state. You do not change through intensity. You change through stability. You do not collapse reality through desire. You shape it through identity. You do not break patterns through force. You dissolve them through awareness, and you do not become someone new. You return to someone more consistent. Now pause here, because this is where integration begins to happen at a deeper level. Not as information, but as recognition. Something inside you already knows this. It is not new. It is familiar. It is something you may have felt in moments of clarity, but not yet stabilized in daily life. And that is the final step. Stabilization. Not learning more, not adding more, but becoming steady enough that the identity no longer fractures under pressure. Now imagine what life looks like from that state. You wake up, and there is no internal negotiation. There is clarity. You act without needing emotional permission. You decide without hesitation. You move without inner resistance. Not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer divided within yourself. Now here is the subtle truth that completes everything. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you consistently are. Let that settle deeply. Now think about what that means. If you are inconsistent, reality reflects inconsistency. If you are fragmented, reality reflects fragmentation. If you are stable, reality reorganizes around stability. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. Now take a slow breath with that idea, because this is where everything simplifies. You stop chasing outcomes. You stop overinterpreting delays. You stop collapsing into emotional reactions. And instead, you begin returning to alignment, returning to identity, returning to stability again and again, until return becomes natural, until alignment becomes default, until effort is no longer required. Now let's go even deeper. There is a point where you stop trying to become anything, because you are no longer referencing a future version of yourself. You're living from a stabilized version of yourself now. And when that happens, life changes shape. Opportunities align differently. Decisions feel clearer. Timing feels more fluid. Resistance decreases without effort. Not because the world changed first, but because you changed how you remain within it. Now here is the final integration of everything. You are not here to force reality into submission. You are here to become so coherent internally that reality has no distortion to reflect back. Now pause. Because this is the final shift. When there is no internal contradiction, there is nothing for reality to resist. And when there is nothing to resist, life begins to move effortlessly, naturally, precisely. Now, as we reach the end of this journey, I want to leave you with a final expansion. Everything you have been calling life is not something happening outside of you. It is a reflection of what is stabilized within you. And when that is fully understood, everything changes. Because life is no longer something you pursue, it becomes something you reflect. Let that land slowly. Life is not a pursuit. Life is a reflection. And from this moment forward, the only question that remains is not, what do I need to get? But instead, what am I being that life is currently reflecting back? And as that question settles, something inside you begins to stabilize in a way that does not require effort anymore. It simply becomes. And now, you are no longer just learning this principle. You are beginning to live from it. And that is where everything truly begins. Now bring everything back into focus. You are never learning how to manifest reality. You are remembering how you've always been shaping it. Through frequency, through meaning, through identity, through the way you respond when life does not go your way. And if there is one truth to take with you now, it is this. Nothing outside of you has power until you give it stability inside of you. Not success, not failure, not delay, not chaos. Only your state decides what becomes real. So from this moment forward, stop asking, how do I get what I want? And start asking, who am I being while I wait? Because that version of you, that steady version, that calm version, that certain version, is already communicating with everything you desire. And reality always responds, not immediately, but inevitably. So here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, do not try to change your life. Change your return point. Every time you drift into doubt, return to alignment. Every time you react, return to awareness. Every time you feel lost, return to stillness. Not perfectly, but consistently. Because that is what the 0.1% understand. They are not chasing reality. They are stabilizing the version of themselves. Reality has no choice but to match. And now that you see it, your life is no longer something you wait for. It is something you are already inside of. And the only question left is, how consciously will you live it from this moment forward?